Hi everybody, it's Jeannie from Gardening Jones. We're just getting over a thunderstorm here in northeast PA. It's July 7th. You may still hear some rumbles, thunder in the background, but the garden's happy. It's nice and water. If it starts lightning out, I'm out of here because I don't want to be on this metal chair, lightning storm. But anyway, did you ever hear of the three sisters of the field? Okay, did you ever hear of the fourth sister of the field? That's what I'd like to talk to you about today. I'm going to show you what we're doing. And I also feel like I'm the only person who knows what the one sister is supposed to do in the garden. I watched a lot of videos. Anyway, the three sisters of the field, which now is something that's known as intercropping, planting things together because they have a symbiotic relationship. They can help each other. It includes corn, beans, and squash. It was originally practiced by the indigenous peoples of this country, most likely in the northern half of the United States and into Canada. The idea is that you plant corn, which is a field or dry corn, not sweet corn. You plant beans. The corn acts as a stake. The beans, whole beans grow up it, dry beans. Beans will take nitrogen out of the air and fixate it into the soil, and it helps the beans grow, and corn loves nitrogen. So they work out together real well. The third sister is squash, and the idea is that it's winter squash as opposed to zucchini or crookneck squash. A lot of gardeners I've seen on videos or talked to in groups say that the way the squash helps is that the big leaves cover the ground and keep the weeds away. Well, you know, in a perfect world, I've never personally seen that happen in my garden. What I was told by a person who is an indigenous person, and it makes a lot more sense to me, is that the idea of the squash is to help keep the deer out. Squash vine, winter squash, will produce along vines pretty rapidly actually, and the biggest thing the deer are afraid of is getting a hoof caught. That's a death sentence in many ways to them. I know we have had issues with deer where we can just lay chicken wire down on the ground and they won't come anywhere near it because they're afraid of getting their hoof caught. Even using a hose sometimes can help keep them away. If you have a hose that leaks, you can help keep them away with that. But so the whole idea is you plant the corn, you plant the beans, you plant the squash in the spring, come back in the fall. You harvest the dry corn. You can keep the seeds for next year. You can grind the corn as you need it, certainly like for corn cakes or like a tortilla, that kind of thing, or for breading food. And the corn will last forever. The dry beans, it's similar. It's a way to get protein in the middle of winter when maybe hunting is a little bit more difficult. Some animals go into hibernation or go underground at the very least and are not out as much because there's nothing to forage for them. So hunting is more difficult. So dry beans can be kept as a source of protein. The squash, again, it's winter squash. It will last for months. You'll have something fresh to eat well into the winter months, well into coming up on spring. So that was the idea. The fourth sister, which is usually not talked about, is sunflowers. Similar to the corn, the sunflowers grow up. They support the beans, and they offer a source of nutrition that does not need to be kept. You know, you can just pull the seeds out, reuse some for the next year, and roast and eat the others, whatever. So you have a good nutrition source for that. So now you can grow sweet corn instead of dry, which most people don't want dry corn, they want sweet corn. I've done it. It's a little bit more difficult to harvest the corn because the beans are surrounding it. You could grow a pole bean, but then they're harvesting, so you're missing that whole thing about going out in the fall and harvesting everything at once. But a pole green bean, you could do that. And you could grow the zucchini, but you know, of course you're not going to keep the deer out of your garden. This year we did have more of an issue with deer because, indirectly because of COVID. A lot of people from New York, especially the city, from New Jersey and some from Connecticut, but mostly New York and New Jersey, who had summer homes up here vacationing in this kind of resort area in the country, decided to move up here full time. And I can't say as I blame them. If you can work from home, we live here full time, we love it here. So the downside of that is that the people from out of state tend to feed the deer. You know, isn't this cute? The deer's in my yard. I know our local agway used to brag that they sold more deer food than any other agway in the state, so that gives you some idea. Feeding the deer is not a good idea for the deer. It used to be they would leave, the tourists would go home, you know, in the winter, and the deer wouldn't know how to forage. But what's happened now is the deer have no fear of people, so they're coming right out into people's yards. There's a lot more traffic, so that's also bad for, you know, accidents, for the deer not to be afraid. There's so much in the woods for them to eat, they really don't need to come into people's yards. But there had a deer in the backyard, a female, and I picked up a couple stones, and I knew I would never hit it. I would never be able to reach it. I wouldn't want to hurt an animal. I would never hurt an animal. But I threw the stones as an effort to scare it out of the yard, because I don't want her eating my apple tree and whatever. And it just walked towards me. So it's obviously not afraid. We have a young buck who was coming in the front yard here, and I'll show you that damage in a minute. The dog was on the porch barking. He just looked at the dog. My husband claims he made a gesture towards him. He was not afraid of either one of them, and just walked right into our 3 sisters' bed, actually 4 sisters' bed, and I'll show the damage that was done. So we had to put up a lot of extra fencing and try to keep the deer out. And so far we've been good. The corn's coming up good. The damage that was done, surprisingly, I thought it would kill the corn. I've never had corn eaten down by deer before. So I planted extras, so of course the corn survived, and now the extra corn is coming up. But we're growing our 3 sisters, 4 sisters garden really more for our chickens than anything else. The corn that we're growing can supplement their feed in the winter months. They get fed corn, but it's still something different. The sunflower seeds help chickens a lot. It gives them a lot of healthy fat, which helps keep them warm. And the winter squash, I'll have to cut up in a number of pieces before I give it to them, because there's 7 chickens, and I don't want them fighting over it. They love the squash. They love the seeds that are in the squash. So they'll be getting, and we'll eat some of the squash too, don't get me wrong. We've got enough growing this winter to share with the chickens, probably with the neighbors, but with the chickens. And in the course of the summer, some of the other things that we're growing, like cucumbers and the summer squash zucchini, they can get once they're old enough to eat that. Right now, they're just a couple weeks old. So let's take a minute and we'll go and look. Before I forget, because I always forget, if you find this video helpful or informational, please give it a thumbs up, and somewhere down there and at the end of the video, there's a way to subscribe if you haven't already. So I'm going to wait till the storm passes, but you don't have to, and I'm going to take you right out to our 3 sisters' garden. See you then. Let me show you the corn first. It was, actually some of these you can see where it was bitten off. Here too, this is where the deer got in. I didn't really expect these corn plants to survive. They were bitten down. They were only about this tall, the tops, when they were bitten down. So I did plant additional corn, which has just started coming up. Same thing happened over here. The deer walked right through the middle, basically. It bit down these plants. You can see some of the damage here, but you can also see it's coming right back. So I'm going to have little corns. There are some coming up, as I didn't expect the larger plants to survive. The bean seeds just went in right next to them, as I said, this past weekend. Over here, we have some of the squash are just coming up, and some of the sunflowers. So there's a sunflower here. There's some more better. These are smaller sunflowers. I really wanted the 6 to 12 feet tall ones. There's more squash. In the back there is a taller sunflower, but for some reason those sunflowers didn't come up. You can see some squash here in the buckets also. Those are butternut squash. Here we have, this is called North Georgia Candy Roaster. It's a squash that will be getting tied up. It's started to tie up already. There's 3 different types of zucchini. This one, which is really going tall, is called cucuzzi. It's actually an edible gourd that looks like a cucumber, except it can get really big, and you eat it like a zucchini, so they call it cucuzzi, and I just thought that was pretty interesting. So there's 2 of those. In this bucket is 2 zucchini plants, which are already starting to flower. You can see here there's a female with a little plant on the back, and here's some males coming up with no little zucchini on the back. So we'll be getting zucchini, and I am going to try my hand at growing zucchini vertically. So one of these 2 plants I've started to grow vertically, and we'll see how that goes. This one is Black Beauty. This one is called Armenian. And this zucchini, there's one in here, it looks like, yeah. This is Costata Romanesco. It's an heirloom. It will not produce as much, but it will be good. And over here in the end, we have some cucumbers, and I believe there is a watermelon in there too. We're trying to keep the squash bugs away by using BT, but other than the zucchini, which is Cucurbita pepo, most of these squash are Cucurbita moschata, which is a thick, non-hollow stemmed squash, so the squash bugs tend to stay away from it. Same with the butternut. So we'll see what happens. I'll let you know later in the season.